Of course, it was a quiet evening. The sky painted in soft shades of pink and orange as the sun began its slow descent behind the city skyline. The streets were calm, lined with trees that swayed gently in the cool breeze. People were finishing up their days, some heading home from work, others taking leisurely walks with their families. On one such street, a sleek black SUV rolled steadily, its headlights cutting through the soft glow of the setting sun. Inside the vehicle sat the FBI director, a man known for his calm demeanor, sharp instincts, and years of experience handling some of the country's most sensitive investigations. Today, like most days, had been long and exhausting. The weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders, and he welcomed the silence and solitude of the drive home. As he maneuvered through the familiar streets, his mind wandered to the cases waiting on his desk, files that demanded attention and careful thought. He thought about the agents he led, the delicate operations that required precision, and the constant need to make split-second decisions. Despite the calm exterior, a quiet tension lingered within him, a reminder of the immense pressure his role carried. He adjusted the rearview mirror, glanced at the dashboard clock, and let out a small sigh. The road ahead seemed simple enough, a routine drive he had taken countless times. Yet something about the evening felt slightly different, though he couldn't quite place it. A few blocks ahead, a local police officer sat in his patrol car, the soft hum of the engine blending with the occasional chirp of crickets in the evening air. The officer had been on duty for several hours, patrolling the neighborhood and keeping an eye out for any unusual activity. He was relatively new to this area, still learning the subtle rhythms of the streets, the familiar faces of residents, and the quiet corners where trouble could sometimes hide. Today had been particularly challenging. Paperwork had piled up, calls for minor disturbances had tested his patience, and the pressure from superiors to maintain order was a constant, invisible weight. He sipped the last of his coffee, a bitter taste lingering in his mouth, and scanned the street ahead, eyes alert for anything out of the ordinary. As the FBI director's SUV approached a slight curve in the road, the officer noticed it momentarily exceeding the speed limit. Without hesitation, he switched on his lights and siren, signaling for the vehicle to pull over. The SUV gradually slowed, coming to a stop at the side of the road. The director's heart rate quickened slightly. Traffic stops were routine, yes, but there was always an element of unpredictability. He reached for his license and registration, keeping his hands visible, aware that the officer's first impression mattered. The officer stepped out of his car, the weight of his duty pressing on him. He approached the SUV with caution, hand resting near his holster, eyes scanning for any signs of threat. The evening had been quiet, but his instincts were sharp, honed through hours of training and a natural caution that had served him well. As he reached the driver's side window, he gave the standard greeting, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of alertness. "Good evening, sir. Do you know why I stopped you?" The director looked up, surprised by the tone in the officer's voice. "Good evening, officer. I believe I was speeding. Here's my license and registration." He handed over the documents calmly, his demeanor composed, his voice steady. There was no aggression in his manner, only a quiet professionalism. The officer took the documents, briefly glancing at the information. Something about the briefcase on the passenger seat, the formal appearance of the man, and the confident way he handled himself triggered a sudden, irrational suspicion. The officer's mind raced through scenarios, each one more unlikely than the last, but in that instant, the combination of factors seemed to suggest a potential threat. Before the director could respond further, the officer drew his firearm, pointing it toward the SUV. "Step out of the vehicle. Now," he commanded, his voice firm and unwavering. Time seemed to slow for the director. Shock registered in his eyes, but he remained calm, raising his hand slowly. "Officer, please, I am the FBI director. I am unarmed. I can explain everything," he said, trying to de-escalate the situation, his tone measured and steady. The officer, however, was on high alert, every sense heightened by the perceived threat. The weight of responsibility, the fear of making a mistake, and the pressure to maintain control all collided in that moment. He repeated his command, more forcefully this time, signaling the director to exit the vehicle immediately. The director complied, carefully stepping out with hands raised, the evening air brushing against his face. His mind raced, calculating the risks, analyzing the officer's behavior, and preparing for any sudden move that might escalate the situation further. Bystanders began to notice the confrontation, some pausing on the sidewalks, others stepping out of nearby homes to see what was happening. Phones emerged from pockets. Cameras recorded the tense scene, and whispers spread through the small crowd that had started to form. The sight of an armed officer facing a calm, unarmed man created an unsettling tension that hung thick in the air. The director maintained his composure, understanding the importance of patience, knowing that any sudden movement could be disastrous. The officer's partner, stationed a few blocks away, noticed the radio call and began heading toward the scene. The first officer's thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, suspicion, and uncertainty. He knew he was following protocol, yet something about the situation felt off. The director's calm and authoritative presence contrasted sharply with the officer's own nerves, creating a psychological tension that neither could fully articulate. As the moment stretched, the director spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Officer, I understand your caution, but I am not a threat. I have identification. I am asking you to lower your weapon so we can resolve this safely." The officer hesitated, caught between his training and the mounting evidence that his assumption might be wrong. The presence of onlookers, the weight of responsibility, and the sudden awareness of potential consequences all pressed down on him. The director's eyes remained steady, his posture relaxed yet assertive, exuding a quiet authority that demanded recognition even in the face of danger. The tension was palpable, each second stretching longer than the last. Bystanders held their breath, unsure of what might happen next. The officer's grip on his firearm tightened, his mind racing through every possible scenario, every outcome, every mistake he could make. The director, sensing the officer's inner turmoil, continued to speak calmly, offering reassurances and explanations, each word carefully chosen to prevent escalation. In that moment, the street seemed to shrink. The world narrowed to the two men and the delicate balance between authority and misunderstanding. The evening breeze, once gentle and soothing, now carried an almost surreal weight, as if time itself was holding its breath. The director's thoughts flickered to his family, his team, the countless missions and decisions he had undertaken. He reflected on the importance of calm, of patience, of human judgment in moments of crisis. His own experience had taught him that the smallest misstep could have catastrophic consequences, and he was determined not to let fear dictate the outcome. Minutes passed, each one filled with a tension that was almost unbearable. The officer's partner arrived on the scene, radio crackling softly as backup arrived. The first officer's focus momentarily shifted, and in that brief window the director subtly reached for his phone, discreetly activating a silent alert to notify his office of the situation. The presence of the partner, the potential for additional witnesses, and the growing crowd all contributed to a fragile sense of hope that the situation could be defused without harm. The first officer's eyes darted between the director and his partner, uncertainty clouding his judgment. He knew something was amiss, yet the precise nature of the threat, if any, remained unclear. The director maintained his calm, projecting a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with the officer's tension. Each man was acutely aware of the stakes, the potential consequences, and the fragile balance that hung between them. As the sun dipped further below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, the director's voice cut through the growing murmur of the crowd. "Officer, I am not here to cause trouble. I am asking you to resolve this safely. Please lower your weapon and we can clarify everything." The officer's mind raced. The combination of the director's calm, the presence of his partner, the growing realization that the crowd could complicate matters, and the internal pressure of his role all converged in a single moment of clarity. He made a decision, slowly lowering his weapon while keeping a cautious eye on the director. Relief washed over the director's face, a subtle exhale of tension that had been building for minutes. The crowd murmured, some clapping softly, others simply watching in stunned silence. The director remained composed, careful not to take any action that could be misinterpreted. The first officer's partner approached, confirming the director's identity and providing a brief explanation of the situation. The misunderstanding became clear, the tension slowly dissipating, replaced by a mix of relief, embarrassment, and reflection. In the aftermath, the director's mind remained alert, noting the human reactions, the fragility of trust, and the importance of communication. The officer, meanwhile, grappled with the sudden realization of his mistake. the weight of responsibility pressing down heavily. Both men had experienced a confrontation that could have ended tragically, yet through patience, composure, and a careful balance of authority, the situation had been resolved. The quiet evening resumed its gentle rhythm, but the events on that street would leave a lasting impression on everyone involved, a reminder of the delicate interplay between fear, duty, and human judgment. The air was thick with tension, even as the immediate danger seemed to have passed. The FBI director remained standing on the curb, his hands slowly lowering to his sides, but his mind was racing. Every instinct, every lesson from decades of law enforcement experience told him to stay alert. The officer who had pointed a gun at him was visibly shaken, but the calm that had just returned was fragile, like a thin layer of ice over deep water. Any sudden movement could still set off a chain reaction. Around them, the small crowd of bystanders was restless, whispering among themselves, eyes darting between the men, phones raised to capture every moment. Some faces expressed relief, others anxiety, and a few reflected frustration at what they had just witnessed. The first officer's hands trembled slightly as he lowered his weapon fully, a subtle acknowledgement of the tension that had gripped him moments earlier. His partner stepped closer, speaking softly but firmly, ensuring that the situation remained under control. The director's voice remained calm, soothing, yet authoritative as he addressed the officers. "We need to resolve this safely. I am willing to cooperate fully, and I have identification." The first officer nodded, though uncertainty still lingered in his eyes. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Questions about how he had misjudged the situation, fear of the repercussions from his department, and an uneasy awareness of the public scrutiny already forming around them. He had been trained to handle high-pressure encounters, but nothing had prepared him for the revelation that the man he had considered a potential threat was one of the most powerful figures in federal law enforcement. The reality pressed on him with a weight that made his chest tighten. The director slowly reached into his jacket pocket and produced his official identification, holding it out clearly so the officers could see it. His movements were deliberate, careful not to startle anyone. "I am the FBI director," he said again, his tone calm, almost measured. "You can verify this if necessary. There is no need for further escalation." The partner officer glanced at the ID and then back at the first officer. There was a moment of silence, a pause heavy with realization. The first officer's eyes widened as he read the credentials, the shock evident on his face. His mind replayed the moments leading up to this instant, the decision to draw his weapon, the perceived threat, the growing tension, and the crushing awareness of how quickly a simple traffic stop had spiraled into a dangerous confrontation. For the director, every second was a careful balance between authority and patience. He had been trained to read situations like this, to maintain composure even when confronted with unpredictable human behavior. Yet he couldn't ignore the human element, the fear and stress visible in the officer's posture. He understood that this was not just about protocol. It was about human reactions, emotions, and judgment under pressure. He spoke again, his voice steady and even. "This could have ended very differently. We need to take a moment to calm down and understand each other." The first officer lowered his gaze, swallowing hard, the weight of responsibility pressing heavily. He could feel the eyes of the bystanders on him, the judgment, the confusion, the fear. He wanted to explain, to justify his actions, yet words seemed inadequate. The director, sensing the internal struggle, chose to maintain a respectful distance, allowing the officer to regain composure while subtly guiding the interaction toward resolution. Nearby, the crowd began to murmur more loudly. Phones were still recording, and the presence of witnesses added another layer of complexity. The director remained aware of this, knowing that the situation's perception could have as much impact as the facts themselves. He understood that the officers were under pressure, that the first officer's reaction was influenced by a mix of stress, training, and instinct. He had seen similar situations before, where fear and misunderstanding escalated far beyond what was necessary. His role now was to de-escalate, to turn a dangerous encounter into a learning moment. The director asked, "Can you tell me what you were concerned about? I want to understand your perspective so we can prevent this in the future." The first officer hesitated, the words caught in his throat. Finally he spoke, voice low, almost trembling. I thought you were a threat. The briefcase, the way you were dressed, the confidence, you seemed different from anyone I've stopped before. I didn't know what else to do. The director nodded slowly, acknowledging the honesty. I understand. Fear and uncertainty can drive people to act quickly, but it's important to remember that appearances can be misleading. In this case, a professional misunderstanding nearly led to a dangerous outcome. As they spoke, the partner officer kept watch, ensuring that no one else interfered and that the scene remained safe. He could sense the tension easing slightly, though he knew the situation was far from over. The first officer's initial fear had been replaced by a dawning understanding, yet the weight of the incident lingered. He realized that his actions would not only be scrutinized internally but also publicly. The director's calm and measured response contrasted sharply with the chaos of the moments before, emphasizing the importance of patience and communication. Meanwhile, the bystanders continued to record and whisper, their curiosity mixed with concern. Some speculated about what had occurred. Others expressed relief that no one was hurt. The presence of the director, a figure of national authority, elevated the event from a local incident to a moment of public interest. The scene, once tense and dangerous, now carried a different energy, an awareness of how fragile human interactions could be and how easily misunderstandings could escalate. The director took a deep breath, sensing that the first officer needed reassurance as much as the situation required de-escalation. We all make decisions under pressure, he said softly. What matters is learning from them, understanding the impact, and ensuring that safety comes first. I appreciate that you were trying to protect your community. The first officer's shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension easing as he absorbed the words. The director's acknowledgement of his intent, rather than condemnation of his actions, allowed him to process the situation without immediate fear of reprisal. It was a delicate balance, acknowledging error while maintaining professionalism, a lesson the director had learned over many years. At that moment, the silence of the street seemed to return, the earlier tension replaced by cautious calm. The director's presence, his demeanor, and his careful handling of the situation served as a subtle reminder of the human element in law enforcement, the necessity of patience, understanding, and empathy even in moments of fear. The first officer, still shaken but beginning to comprehend the gravity of his mistake, took a tentative step back, lowering his gaze in reflection. The director noticed the subtle shift, recognizing an opportunity to guide the resolution toward a safer conclusion. He suggested, "Let's exchange information and ensure that the incident is properly documented. This way we can clarify the facts and prevent misunderstandings in the future." The officers nodded, moving toward a more procedural approach, retrieving notepads and radios to communicate with their superiors. The director cooperated fully, providing identification, statements, and explanations. The bystanders, sensing the transition from chaos to order, began to disperse, though their recordings and observations would ensure that the event remained in public discourse. As the director continued to navigate the interaction, he reflected on the lessons inherent in the encounter. He understood that human error, stress, and perception played significant roles in law enforcement situations. The first officer's mistake was not malicious, but it was serious, and it underscored the importance of training, communication, and restraint. The director's focus remained on ensuring that the situation concluded without harm, that the officers learned from the incident, and that the broader community understood the nuances of human judgment under pressure. The evening wore on, and the last traces of sunlight faded, leaving the street bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. The officers, now more composed, reviewed their actions and prepared reports. The director, maintaining his calm demeanor, provided his input, emphasizing clarity, honesty, and the human element of the encounter. Each word was chosen to guide, to educate, and to prevent further misunderstanding. In the quiet aftermath, the first officer sat in his patrol car, replaying the events in his mind. He felt a mix of regret, relief, and a profound sense of responsibility. The encounter had been a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the consequences that could arise from a single misjudgment. He knew that his actions would be scrutinized, that consequences were inevitable, but he also recognized the importance of growth, learning, and accountability. The director, meanwhile, resumed his journey home, the events lingering in his thoughts. He considered the fragility of human interactions, the thin line between authority and misunderstanding, and the importance of patience, empathy, and communication. He understood that incidents like this, though rare, held valuable lessons for everyone involved, from officers on patrol to leaders in positions of national responsibility. As he drove away, the street slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, the evening air carrying the subtle sounds of the city settling into night. The director's mind remained alert, reflecting on the events, the human reactions, and the broader implications. The officers, too, faced an uncertain path ahead, a journey shaped by accountability, reflection, and the need to restore trust and confidence in their judgment and actions. The evening had been a profound reminder that even in moments of fear and confusion, patience, understanding, and human connection could transform potential disaster into an opportunity for growth and learning. The night had grown deeper, the streetlights casting long shadows across the quiet road. The initial tension from the traffic stop had faded, but the impact of the event lingered in everyone's minds. The FBI director remained calm, standing near his vehicle while the first officer's partner had taken control of the situation, speaking quietly into the radio and confirming details with dispatch. Despite the surface calm, both the officers and the director felt the weight of what had just happened. It was rare for a routine stop to escalate in such a way, and even rarer for someone of the director's stature to be involved directly in such a confrontation. The first officer's hands still shook slightly, a reflection of the intense emotions he had experienced. Fear, regret, and relief mingled in a confusing swirl. He glanced at the director, who remained composed and felt an unfamiliar respect mixed with guilt. The man he had nearly treated as a threat had responded with patience and dignity, qualities that highlighted the difference between authority and fear-driven reaction. The realization settled in. This encounter was a moment of reckoning for his judgment, and the consequences would follow. The director, aware of the delicate balance in the air, addressed both officers in a calm tone. "It is important we resolve this properly. We can all learn from what just happened. I am willing to cooperate fully to ensure clarity and accountability." The first officer nodded, swallowing hard, acknowledging the gravity of the moment. He knew that internal reviews and public scrutiny were inevitable. He had acted out of instinct and caution, but the result had nearly become a disaster. The partner officer, observing the scene and understanding the delicate dynamics, stepped closer, offering a quiet but firm presence, ensuring the first officer could navigate the aftermath without further mistake. The director began explaining his routine, why he had been driving through the area, and the context of his appearance. He spoke with measured clarity, aware that every word mattered and could help prevent further misunderstanding. His voice was calm, authoritative, yet compassionate, providing both reassurance and guidance. The officers listened intently, slowly realizing how the combination of factors, appearance, timing, and stress, had led to a near-tragic misjudgment. The first officer's mind replayed the moments of the stop, the sudden decision to draw his weapon, the perceived threat, the growing crowd of bystanders, and the director's calm demeanor. He felt a deep sense of regret, mixed with relief that the situation had been resolved safely. Each detail of the encounter seemed to weigh on him, pressing him to reflect on his actions and the potential consequences. Meanwhile, the director's perspective was equally focused. He understood human error, the influence of stress, and the need for patience in tense moments. He observed the officer's behavior with careful attention, noting the signs of fear, the attempts to regain composure, and the underlying respect for authority that remained intact despite the mistake. He realized that this incident was not just about protocol, but about understanding human reactions, communication and judgment under pressure. The crowd that had gathered earlier had mostly dispersed, though a few remained watching from a distance. Phones were still out, recording and sharing the event online. The director noted the public's perception, aware that this moment would be analyzed, discussed, and perhaps misinterpreted by many. He understood the responsibility that came with his role, not only to manage the immediate situation but also to maintain trust and clarity in the eyes of the community. The first officer finally spoke, his voice low, reflecting the mix of emotions he carried. I realize now how serious my actions were. I acted without complete information, and I understand the danger it posed. I want to correct this, but I don't know how to begin." The director responded with calm authority. "Acknowledgement is the first step. Mistakes happen, but accountability, learning, and prevention are what follow. You must cooperate fully with your department's review and ensure that communication and procedure are followed to prevent this from happening again. The partner officer added support, emphasizing the importance of maintaining composure, following protocol, and documenting the events clearly. Together, the three men worked through a series of steps to clarify the situation, exchange information, and ensure that the incident would be accurately recorded. The director's presence and approach transformed the situation from one of conflict into a learning opportunity. As the night deepened, the first officer reflected on the human element of law enforcement. He thought about the thin line between authority and fear, the pressure to act quickly, and the consequences of misjudgment. He realized that the encounter with the director was a moment that would stay with him for the rest of his career, a reminder of the weight of responsibility and the importance of careful observation and communication. The director, too, reflected on the experience. He understood that even individuals trained extensively in law enforcement could act out of fear and misperception. He thought about the broader implications for his own team and the public. Training, communication, and empathy were crucial in moments of tension. He made a mental note to discuss this incident with his colleagues and agents, using it as an example of how calm, composed leadership could prevent escalation and promote understanding. Meanwhile, in the background, the community's response began to take shape. Some residents praised the officers for caution, acknowledging the complexity of their role. Others expressed concern about the near miss and the potential for tragedy. Social media buzzed with comments and videos, the story quickly reaching a wider audience. The director was aware of this, knowing that transparency, accountability, and professionalism would be key to maintaining trust and credibility. The first officer, seated in his patrol car for a moment of reflection, felt the weight of public scrutiny and personal responsibility. He understood that this incident would shape his approach to law enforcement in the future. Every action, every decision, and every interaction carried consequences beyond what he could immediately see. The director's measured response had shown him the importance of patience, clarity, and human empathy, lessons he would carry forward. The director prepared to leave, his calm demeanor reassuring to the officers. "I appreciate your cooperation. Let's ensure the documentation is complete and that we learn from this incident. Safety, communication, and accountability are what matter most." The officers nodded, now focused on completing the necessary procedures. The first officer still felt a sense of inner turmoil, but the director's words offered guidance, helping him navigate the aftermath with clarity and purpose. The night's events had been intense, but they were now transitioning into a process of reflection, accountability, and learning. The director returned to his vehicle, preparing to continue his journey home. He glanced back briefly at the officers, noting the mixture of relief and contemplation on their faces. He understood that this incident would leave a lasting impression, shaping future decisions and interactions. He also recognized that the community's perception, while influenced by incomplete information, could be managed through transparency, professionalism, and education. As the SUV pulled away, the first officer and his partner remained on the curb, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The air was still, the tension slowly dissolving into thoughtfulness and awareness. Both officers understood the gravity of their near mistake and the importance of learning from it. The director's calm, patient, and authoritative handling of the situation had turned a potentially dangerous encounter into a moment of clarity and education. The night, now fully settled in darkness, carried the quiet lessons of human behavior, responsibility, and judgment. The first officer would carry the memory of this evening forward, aware that fear and misperception could lead to serious consequences, and that empathy, patience, and clear communication were essential in every encounter. The director, continuing his journey home, reflected on the value of human understanding in law enforcement and the need to continually balance authority with compassion. In the quiet aftermath, everyone involved had learned something vital. Mistakes, while inevitable in high-pressure situations, could be transformed into opportunities for growth. Human reactions, when guided by patience and understanding, could prevent escalation. And above all, the importance of maintaining composure, communicating clearly, and respecting the humanity in every interaction became the central lesson of a night that began with tension and fear but ended with reflection and insight. The following morning, the aftermath of the previous night's confrontation began to unfold in ways that no one could have predicted. The FBI director returned to his office, a building that normally represented control and order, but now felt like a place of reflection and urgency. He was calm on the outside, as always, but inside he replayed the events in his mind, analyzing each moment, each decision, and each reaction. The weight of the near miss stayed with him, not as fear, but as a reminder of the unpredictability of human behavior and the fragility of life in law enforcement encounters. The FBI's internal communication systems buzzed with updates, emails and calls from concerned staff. Agents and colleagues who had heard of the incident were seeking clarification and expressing concern. The director understood their anxiety and took time to reassure them, emphasizing the importance of patience, calm, and a measured approach. Even in the face of mistakes, the focus had to remain on lessons learned and preventive measures. His own reflection on the incident was guided by the understanding that accountability and clarity were the only ways to prevent similar events in the future. Meanwhile, the local police department had launched its internal review almost immediately. Supervisors interviewed both the officers involved, taking careful notes of their recollections. Body camera footage, radio transmissions, and witness statements were gathered to create a complete picture of the incident. It became clear that the first officer had acted out of fear and misunderstanding, misreading a situation that, with more clarity, would have been routine. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him as he recounted every action, every thought, and every emotion. The officers knew this review would not be simple. It would involve intense scrutiny, both within the department and in the public eye. The community's response began to emerge as news of the incident spread. Local residents shared videos and stories online, creating a mix of opinions and reactions. Some praised the officers for taking caution, others criticized them for overreacting. The director was aware that public perception could shape the narrative, and he remained committed to transparency and professionalism. His team worked to release accurate information, emphasizing the context of the encounter, the lessons learned, and the importance of human judgment under pressure. For the first officer, the days following the incident were a storm of emotion. He grappled with regret, relief, and a deep sense of responsibility. The initial adrenaline of the confrontation had long faded, replaced by the realization that a single misjudgment could have had life-altering consequences. He spent long hours reflecting on every moment, trying to understand how fear and instinct had driven him to act so quickly. Sleep came fitfully, filled with vivid replays of the encounter and an awareness of how narrowly disaster had been avoided. He knew that disciplinary action was inevitable, yet he also recognized the opportunity for growth and learning. The FBI director, understanding the human toll of the incident, reached out to both officers through official channels. He expressed his understanding of the pressures they faced and the importance of learning from the event, rather than succumbing to shame or fear. His approach was not punitive but educational, emphasizing the human element of law enforcement and the need for reflection and improvement. The director knew that accountability and empathy had to go hand in hand if lasting change were to occur. The internal investigation proceeded with thoroughness and precision. Every detail mattered, from the initial observation of the speeding vehicle to the officer's decision to draw his weapon, to the director's calm de-escalation techniques. Witnesses were interviewed, body camera footage analyzed, and procedural guidelines reviewed. The officers cooperated fully, providing statements and insights, aware that their actions were under intense scrutiny. The process was painstaking, yet it highlighted the importance of transparency, accountability, and professionalism in resolving such incidents. In the police department, conversations shifted from blame to learning. Supervisors and colleagues discussed how training could be improved, how communication could be more effective, and how stress and fear could influence decision-making. The first officer, despite his personal turmoil, recognized that this was an opportunity to grow, to better understand the responsibilities of his role, and to ensure that similar situations could be handled more effectively in the future. He began participating in additional training, focusing on de-escalation, communication, and situational awareness, determined to turn a near-tragic mistake into meaningful improvement. The director's reflections extended beyond the officers directly involved. He considered the broader implications for law enforcement and the community. Incidents like this highlighted the delicate balance between authority and perception, fear and judgment, action and restraint. He planned to incorporate this event into training discussions, emphasizing the lessons learned, the value of calm under pressure, the importance of human empathy, and the need for clear communication in high-stakes situations. He believed that sharing real-world examples could help officers navigate complex scenarios more safely in the future. Meanwhile, the first officer faced consequences. He was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation. The reality of the situation hit hard. His career, reputation, and personal sense of pride were all affected. Yet he approached the situation with humility and a commitment to learning. He met with department counselors and mentors, discussing not only the procedural aspects of the incident but also the emotional and psychological impact. He acknowledged the gravity of his actions, while also seeking guidance on how to move forward constructively. The community's conversation continued. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, analyzing the event from multiple angles. Social media platforms buzzed with opinions, debates, and questions about protocol, accountability, and safety. Some residents expressed fear and frustration at the potential danger, while others highlighted the importance of training and support for law enforcement officers. The director and his team monitored these discussions, aware of the power of public perception, and committed to providing accurate information and thoughtful commentary. Through it all, the director remained a steady presence. He met with his team, reviewing the incident in detail and discussing ways to prevent similar situations. He emphasized the human element, understanding that fear, stress, and misperception can influence anyone's actions, even those with extensive training. He highlighted the importance of communication, patience, and clear judgment, using the incident as a real-life lesson in leadership. Authority and empathy. The first officer, reflecting on the events, recognized that accountability was essential not only for his career but also for the safety of the community and the integrity of the department. He cooperated fully with the investigation, providing insights and answering questions honestly. He engaged in self-reflection, considering how his own reactions and decisions had been influenced by stress, fear, and inexperience. Through this process, he began to understand the importance of humility, learning, and growth in law enforcement. Days turned into weeks as the investigation continued. The first officer's actions were scrutinized, reviewed, and evaluated. The director's involvement provided an additional layer of perspective, emphasizing professionalism, calm, and human judgment. The incident served as a case study for both departments, highlighting the importance of training, communication, and empathy in high-pressure situations. It became clear that while mistakes could happen, the response to those mistakes, accountability, learning, and prevention, was what truly mattered. Finally, the internal review concluded. The first officer faced disciplinary measures including suspension and mandatory retraining. He accepted the consequences with a sense of responsibility and a commitment to improvement. The director, satisfied that the situation had been handled appropriately, emphasized the importance of using this experience as a teaching moment for both officers and the broader community. He highlighted that human error, while inevitable, could be mitigated through careful attention, empathy, and continuous learning. In the weeks following, both officers engaged in training sessions focused on de-escalation, communication, and situational awareness. They shared their experiences openly, discussing the emotional and psychological impact of the encounter and how best to prevent similar mistakes in the future. The director participated in some sessions as well, offering guidance, insight, and encouragement, reinforcing the lessons learned and the value of human-centric decision-making. The story of the near miss became a symbol of reflection and growth. For the first officer, it was a humbling experience, one that reshaped his approach to law enforcement and reinforced the importance of patience, observation, and empathy. For the director, it was a reminder of the unpredictability of human behavior and the need for calm leadership in tense situations. For the community, it became a lesson in understanding, accountability, and the human elements that influence every encounter between authority and citizens. Through careful reflection, open communication, and a commitment to learning, the events of that night were transformed from a moment of danger into a profound opportunity for growth. Every person involved, from the officers to the director to the bystanders who witnessed it, carried forward lessons about responsibility, judgment, and humanity. The impact of the incident extended beyond the immediate situation, shaping policies, training, and the personal growth of those involved, ensuring that the near-tragic confrontation would lead to meaningful and lasting change. The weeks following the incident felt surreal for everyone involved. The FBI director continued with his work, yet the memory of that night remained vivid in his mind. Each decision he made, each meeting he attended, carried with it a heightened awareness of how quickly situations could escalate and how small misunderstandings could have dangerous consequences. Despite the tension, he approached each day with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to use the experience to educate and prepare others. He met with his team regularly, recounting the events without dramatization, emphasizing the lessons rather than the fear. He spoke about the importance of human judgment, the necessity of patience under pressure, and the critical value of clear communication. His goal was to ensure that agents understood that even the most careful individuals could be misjudged, and that empathy and professionalism were crucial in maintaining safety and trust. The story of the near miss became a teaching tool, demonstrating how authority and caution must coexist with understanding. Meanwhile, the first officer faced the real consequences of his actions. His suspension had been difficult, not just professionally but emotionally. He felt the weight of public scrutiny, the whispers of colleagues, and the self-imposed pressure to redeem himself. He spent time reflecting on the event, analyzing every decision and seeking ways to ensure such mistakes would never happen again. Counseling sessions, mentorship, and retraining helped him process his emotions, but the true lessons were learned through personal reflection and acknowledgement of responsibility. The community continued to follow the story. Social media discussions, news reports, and local commentary kept the incident alive in public consciousness. Some criticized the first officer for acting recklessly, while others defended the challenges of law enforcement, recognizing the intense pressure and potential danger inherent in every decision officers make. The director's calm handling of the situation, combined with his efforts to educate both law enforcement and the public, gradually shifted the narrative toward understanding and learning rather than blame. Within the police department, conversations began to focus on improvement and prevention. Training programs were revised, incorporating real-world examples from the incident. Officers were encouraged to think critically, communicate effectively, and remain aware of how stress and fear could impact decision-making. The first officer participated actively in these sessions, sharing his experience candidly, acknowledging his mistakes, and emphasizing the importance of learning from errors. His transparency and commitment to growth earned him respect from colleagues and superiors alike. The director also took steps to connect with the community. He spoke at local events and law enforcement workshops, using the incident as an example of the human elements in policing. He highlighted the thin line between caution and overreaction, the importance of de-escalation, and the critical role of patience and empathy. His message resonated with many, fostering a better understanding between law enforcement and the public, and reinforcing the value of trust and communication in maintaining community safety. In the days and weeks that followed, the first officer began to rebuild his sense of confidence. He returned to active duty under supervision, applying the lessons he had learned. Each encounter with the public was approached with a heightened awareness of perception, communication, and human reaction. He understood that his actions not only affected those immediately involved, but also had broader implications for public trust, officer safety, and departmental credibility. This understanding reshaped his approach to policing, emphasizing caution tempered by empathy and professionalism. The director's influence extended beyond the immediate incident. His careful handling and proactive response became case studies in training, emphasizing the importance of de-escalation and human judgment. Agents and officers alike benefited from his insights, learning that even highly trained professionals could be misjudged and that effective communication could prevent potential disasters. The incident, though tense and potentially dangerous, ultimately became a source of education, growth, and improved practices for law enforcement. As time passed, both the director and the first officer reflected on the profound human lessons embedded in the experience. The director recognized the importance of empathy, clarity, and patience in all interactions, understanding that these qualities were as crucial as training and authority. The first officer learned to balance caution with understanding, fear with judgment, and quick decisions with careful consideration. Both men carried forward a deep awareness of the consequences of human error and the potential for growth through reflection and accountability. The community, too, absorbed the lessons. The story remained in conversations and local discussions, serving as a reminder of the complexities of law enforcement and the human factors at play in every interaction. Residents became more aware of the challenges officers face, while officers gained insight into the perspectives of the public. This shared understanding fostered a more empathetic relationship between law enforcement and the community, built on transparency, accountability, and mutual respect. Months later, the first officer's career began to stabilize. He continued to apply the lessons learned, demonstrating increased awareness and improved judgment in every situation. Colleagues noticed the change, recognizing his growth and commitment to professional improvement. He became an advocate for better communication and de-escalation, sharing his experience as a cautionary tale that highlighted the importance of patience, empathy, and reflection in law enforcement. The director, meanwhile, maintained his leadership role, continually integrating the lessons from that night into broader training and educational initiatives. He emphasized the importance of human-centric approaches, understanding that law enforcement was not just about procedure and authority, but also about recognizing the fears, perceptions, and emotions that influence behavior. His efforts fostered a culture of learning and empathy, encouraging officers to approach every encounter with awareness, respect, and clarity. In the quiet moments of reflection, both men considered how far-reaching a single incident could be. A simple traffic stop had escalated into a near-tragic confrontation, yet it had also become a catalyst for growth, understanding, and improved practices. They recognized that human error was inevitable, but the response to error, through accountability, learning, and communication, defined the outcome. This understanding became the foundation for their future actions, shaping not only their careers but also their perspectives on responsibility, leadership, and human interaction. Ultimately, the story concluded not with blame or punishment alone, but with growth and transformation. The director's calm, measured response prevented harm and provided a model for handling high-pressure situations. The first officer's journey through reflection, accountability, and learning demonstrated the capacity for personal and professional growth, even after a serious mistake. The community, informed and engaged, gained a better understanding of the complexities and responsibilities inherent in law enforcement. The incident, once a moment of tension and fear, became a lasting lesson in human judgment, empathy, and the power of learning from experience.